Good evening, and thank you all for joining us for this Envelope Live screening of Cherry. I'm Michael Ordoña. I cover film and television for the Los Angeles Times. Cherry comes to us courtesy of Apple TV Plus and is directed by the Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe, whom you likely know best from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, including what I think is the best superhero film ever, Captain America the Winter Soldier, and the biggest grossing film of all time, Avengers Endgame. Cherry is adapted from Nico Walker's novel by Jessica Goldberg, whom you might know from her Hulu series, The Path, and by the Russo sister, Angela Russo Otstot. I'm sure you all have questions about Cherry out there in Cyberland, and you're in luck because we have the filmmakers here to answer those questions. So please welcome Jessica Goldberg, Angela Russo Otstot, Anthony Russo, and Joe Russo. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Michael. How are you?
All right. I hope you guys are doing well.
Very good.
We've actually had the chance to talk about this film a few times now, and I'm sorry I'm going to have to ask some of those same questions again because I am very interested in, for instance, the bold cinematic choices you guys made as directors and the themes that the four of you settle on. So I want to start with just a little bit of background on the brothers, because as I was saying in the intro, I think most people know you from these gigantic movies, but you actually came from the indie world before that, outside of Hollywood in Cleveland, your hometown, right?
Yeah, that's right. Anthony and I made a micro budget credit card movie in the 90s when it was a bit of a fad to be doing that. I think the year that we applied our film to the Slam Dance Film Festival, there were 2,000 other submissions, all, shot on, 16 millimeter, for, a handful of thousands of dollars, So it was not, it was that period post Soderbergh with Sex, Lies, and Videotape at the Sundance Film Festival, where he was anointed as the next great filmmaker. And it inspired a generation of credit card movies.
That's an interesting way to put it. I know that you guys have a special relationship with Steven Soderbergh, but could you tell me something about the filmmakers and the films that inspired you? That not necessarily that you aped, but that were ways of expressing themselves artistically that made you want to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that we're intertextualists, Anthony, and what's interesting about the book Cherry is that Nico's also an intertextualist. And I think in a way, there's a quote in the book where he talks about the army isn't really the army and we're just pretending to be soldiers and everything felt make-believe to him. And I think that there's an artifice that he exists in, this intense self-awareness that's really a problem, I think, for this next generation. And it's attributable to social media and technology, and I think that what's fascinating about that is that the approach that we took was to be intertextual, was to bring in influences in a way that the character feels them in the book. His life almost becomes a movie to him because he's he can't break through this artifice, he can't break through the self-awareness. So, there's lots of influences we're playing around with in the film, most of which are very tongue-in-cheek, but, you'll see Kubrick in there and Fincher, Scorsese, a lot of great filmmakers who were a huge influence on us. I think perhaps the most defining influence was Truffaut, just on tone, merging, a sense of drama with detached, ironic humor, and trying to really pull at the heartstrings while making you laugh at the same time.
Anthony, do you want to add anything to that, perhaps about filmmakers who were formative for you?
Everything Joe mentioned, but we grew up, we were voracious in terms of what our tastes were and our appetite for film. We watched everything from the multiplex. We had a really amazing art house theater near us called the Cleveland Cinematheque, which had a great program of world cinema, art cinema. We watched The Late Show growing up with our dad all the time. So Bowery Boy movies, TV, everything. So I think we had a very eclectic sort of cinematic upbringing, and that I think is translated into our appetite as directors. And I think you were pointing out earlier that we've, most people may know us from the Marvel work, but we've had a career that's gone from very hardcore indie cinema through a decade of television, primarily comedies, and then into big films. Now sort of coming full circle here with Cherry, which even though it's a big film in some respects, it's a bit more indie in tone and spirit, kind of connecting back to our early work. But I think our jumping off point, like Joe was saying, I think when we first started to write a screenplay together and then shoot a film together was Truffaut. I think that was our sort of biggest influence, and a movie of his called Shoot the Piano Player. Because we did, like Joe was talking about, there's a sense of self-awareness, and I think that's something we sort of grew up with, and it's a layer of artistic expression that we like. And Truffaut really excited us on that level.
I think that's an important point to make, that it's I've described the film to other people as feeling like a big budget indie, because it addresses some themes that I think large studios might not be so comfortable putting a lot of money behind, and it takes on such subjective perspectives that I think are also maybe a little crazy making for studios deciding where to put a lot of money. So this is the first effort you guys have, your first directorial effort since Endgame. And all three of you Russos in previous conversations have mentioned that coming from Cleveland, you know people who've served and who've come back with PTSD. Oh, I'm sorry, that I'm not sure you mentioned those people specifically, but you have mentioned people suffering from addiction. So all four of you, what was it about these themes that you found so compelling, the themes in the book, that you felt like you had to make this movie, you had to write the script and make this movie?
Jessica, do you want to go?
I'll jump in now. I mean, as soon as I read the book, I thought, like, what an extraordinary opportunity to talk about these social issues that are affecting all of our lives right now, and to tell them, and to tell a story that was so creative, and like you said, it's quite intimate, but the way it's directed makes it feel so epic, and it has such scope. And it touches you so deeply personally, but it lets you engage in what's happening in our country and some issues that have been sort of swept under the rug through COVID, through the election. And these are things we have to remind ourselves are still happening. And it's told in such a beautiful, personal way. So I was just like so honored to be a part of working on it.
Angela, on reading the novel, what did you see in it that you had to bring out in a screenplay?
I think, everybody has touched on the remarkable nature in which Nico Walker was able to convey what these struggles are like. And he provided a perspective with such specificity and dimension, in a manner that we don't usually get to see. So that really drew me in, and I felt like there was a real opportunity here, and almost even a responsibility to find a way to translate that to the screen. Because as a reader, you end up feeling so very connected to the character, wanting so badly to reach out and hug the character in some ways. And if we could find a way to translate that level of empathy and compassion and open up an experience that I think oftentimes people who are on the outside of addiction, may have trouble reconciling the choices or the seeming choices that the person is making, and may have trouble understanding the addiction itself. So to travel through it from Cherry's perspective, in this example, was I think quite illuminating, and really that was our goal in adapting the book, was trying to figure out a way to capture that pathos and that empathy.
These issues are very serious, and they're issues that affect human beings, and they're affecting them now. So I'm sure you wanted to approach them with the respect they deserve. So I was wondering about some of your resources. How did you research? How did you learn things that you needed to put in to depict them properly? And this is for all four of you.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, we all have, personal relationships that helped inform our understanding of these issues. But on top of that, we did do a massive amount of research, because it is a big responsibility when you're taking on these issues. You want to make sure that you are being truthful to the experience, and as truthful as possible. And so we interviewed a lot of vets who had PTSD. We talked with family members who lived with vets with PTSD, loved ones, and the same thing with addicts themselves, as well as loved ones of addicts, because it was very important for us to understand from Emily's point of view as well in the movie how you coexist with a person like Cherry, with an addict like Cherry, or someone who's suffering from PTSD like Cherry, and what that does to you. So all of us on this call sort of did a lot of research, as well as the actors, both Tom Holland and Sierra Bravo, who play the two leads in the movie. They spent a lot of time with local services in Cleveland that helped connect them to both PTSD sufferers and opioid addicts.
That's a good point about living with somebody who has PTSD, not just looking at it from that perspective. But I think of a moment in there where he's newly home and he becomes frustrated, I think, with the toaster and throws it. And her response, I think, is very telling. She can't get angry with him because she understands that he's really suffering. So Jessica and Angela, in adapting the book, what were some of the things from the text that you absolutely had to get into it, things that you knew you couldn't lose? And then what were some of the things that were very painful to lose?
Well, it's quite a big, sprawling book that goes over like 15 years, and the voice of the author is just like incredibly lyrical, poetic. He has this great narration, and I think one of the most exciting things about working with the brothers was there was like such an encouragement in the beginning to just play and like try to get as much of the voice of the book into the screenplay and just experiment. So that was very exciting. I'm trying to think, Ange, like what, we definitely, I know one of the first things we decided was we needed to frame the story, and we decided it should be a love story. And that really became like the hook we hung our coat on. So we really focused on making this story a love story, as sort of the device to keep you really invested in these two human beings. What else was there, Ange?
Yeah, I think, when we first read the book, both of us had, every page dog-eared and scribblings all over the place, and very eager to pull bits and pieces right in. But Jess is right. We almost had to do the opposite, which was step away from the book completely for a moment, just to figure out what the architecture of the screenplay would look like. Because, the book is as exceptional as it is, it's really an exploration of a collection of experiences that don't necessarily move with the same propulsion that a cinematic narrative might need to. And because also we wanted to pull a singular love story front and center, whereas the book explores, sort of several relationships with women, we had to identify that first and foremost and find that structure for ourselves. And once we settled on that, that's when we went back into the book and really had a lot of fun in terms of mining the gems, the moments that resonated with us the most when we first read it, but really also mixing and matching in a way because, we had changed the structure of it. So it was taking bits of this character and putting them into this other character, or an insight that the narrator makes in one instance, but finding that it actually could apply to a completely different instance in the film. And I think no matter what we did, even though there were some marked changes being made, we tried very much to honor the spirit of the book and to make the film feel like the book, even though it might be different and necessarily so. But to answer your question, there was a lot that we wanted to get in there. So.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that Nico Walker wrote this while he was in prison. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Wow. It's his debut novel, and it's at least semi-autobiographical, and he wrote it while he was serving the sentence for armed robbery, if I have that story right. So, brothers. So you have these very serious issues that you want to express and you want to take seriously, but you also want to tell the film, and tell me if I'm wrong, in an extremely subjective manner, so that we're seeing it from his perspective, which would explain why you made some of the extreme cinematic choices you made. Am I on the right track when I say that?
You're on the right track. I mean, this is a movie that's broken into chapters because it follows the life cycle of this character, and it's an extreme life cycle. He has very diverse and intense experiences, from being a college student falling in love, to basic training, to war, to PTSD, where he suffers from mental health deterioration, to drug addiction, and finally incarceration and redemption. So this is a very complicated path that this character follows. And we made a choice early on to make distinct, to use style in very distinct ways, moving through each chapter. So we would change the lenses we were working with, or the color palette, or the style of acting, or the style of writing, or the music, everything from top to bottom. It's almost like 6 movies in one. And then unified by this love story, and it really helps. We thought it would really help assist with the subjective approach to the film, where you have a character breaking the fourth wall and inviting you into his story. Now you go into his story and you get, through style, the essence of how he feels about each of these moments, or each of these sections of his life. So, for instance, basic training, this is an intelligent kid who's a bit of a street poet who gets into basic training and realizes he's going to be trained to save lives in a very short period of time. Nothing equivalent to what you would experience if you went to medical school. And he finds it absurd. He finds the training absurd. He finds the level of toxic machismo absurd. And so he has a very specific opinion about it, that we're using lenses and altering the aspect ratio to heighten that feeling of absurdity for him. Performance style is extreme, with some of the drill sergeants. So, it has its own life that is specific to how he feels as a character.
Yeah, that absurdity. I was just thinking when you said that of the moment when he's in the bathroom and the drill sergeant comes in and punches him in a special place, and he goes down and the drill sergeant says, "Attention," and he has to stand up anyway. So Anthony or Joe, could you tell the audience, tell our viewers about some of those specific cinematic choices? You were talking about, for instance, the Petzval lens that I think you used in the first segment where they're falling in love, that makes things seem softer. Is that the right way to put that?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It does defocus the background quite a bit. Yeah, what we were trying to do was, again, this was inspired by the novel itself. There's such a interesting tension and disconnect in the novel between the characters' inner life, Cherry's inner life, and his sort of exterior circumstances and experiences. And it's like the tension between the two is what's so sort of fascinating about the book. And I think what was most unique about it. So we wanted to try to find a way to sort of translate that cinematically, because we can't rely upon sort of the running inner monologue that the book has. We did use a bit of that, of course, with the voiceover and Cherry directly addressing camera, but we had to come up with a lot. Film is such a radically different form than novels. We had to come up with a lot of different techniques to place the movie within the character's subjective experience and allow these experiences that he's having to be colored and shaped by his own interior emotional state and his own interior psychological state. So, yeah, we start the movie with a character who's very feeling disconnected, sensitive, and he meets someone finally that he feels a strong connection to. And it's, we sort of approach that section of the movie with the notion of magical realism. It's, when he meets her for the first time in the quad of the school that they're both going to, we use that lens that you're talking about, and it basically heavily defocuses the background. So it's almost like all he can see, all his attention is going toward this woman. And that entire sequence takes on a sort of dreamy, languid, sort of magical quality. And then that sort of contrasts very starkly to the next segment of the movie where he goes to basic training. And he has those experiences that Joe is just speaking about, which are, he realizes that he joined the Army for the wrong reasons. He might not have been ready for this kind of an experience. And it's that sort of aggressive masculinity, like that scene that you just mentioned, Michael, where he gets punched, is shocking to him. But part of the process of basic training is the Army is trying to break the recruits down into a specific place where they are going to follow orders in a way they've never imagined in their lives up to this point. So a lot of it becomes about sort of limiting their choices, shaving their hair off, sort of stripping their identity away, putting them in uniforms, ordering them around to do ridiculous things that have no practical value whatsoever. And again, to reinforce and break down the individual to be in a place where they can follow commands no matter what they are. So in that segment of the movie, what we did was we actually changed the aspect ratio that you're watching the movie, and we went from a wide screen to a much narrower screen to reflect the fact that his reality is now closing in. We also decided to shoot that entire sequence on a single wide lens. Every shot in that sequence is on the same lens. And the wide lens, what it does is it kind of distorts the image a little bit, and it kind of creates a sort of an artificial sense of distance and spatial relationship. And it can even distort the face a little bit, depending on how close the camera is. So again, it sort of backed up this idea that things were kind of twisted here and perverse, and a sense of absurdity that he's experiencing. That's the only way he can respond to the harshness of this environment. And then after that, we take him over to Iraq, and any sense of absurdity is now gone, because now he's facing a situation that is about life and death. And you're immediately in the moment, and you're trapped by the moment, and you have to exist in that moment with full focus if you're going to make it out of that moment. So what we did at that point was we started to lean upon longer takes where we wanted the audience to really feel like we were there with Cherry, that we were trapped with him in these moments, and there was literally no way out but to go forward and wait for it to end. So there's a variety of more techniques I could go through, but we tried to be very stylistically extreme in terms of translating this highly subjective experience this character was having with these circumstances and experiences that may be more familiar to us all through either our personal lives or through film or literature, et cetera, journalism. But we tried to give it, color all those things specifically to Cherry's understanding of them.
We're running out of time, so I have to mention your lead actors. Tom Holland and C.R. Bravo, the commitment that they put into their roles. I mean, just for one thing, neither of them is exactly a high body fat specimen, and you've told me before that they both lost a fair amount of weight for the roles. But apart from that, for the four of you, can you think of moments of theirs where you saw the character alive, maybe even that surpassed what you thought, but where they brought something that only they could bring?
Yeah, I mean,
there's. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go on, Jessica. So.
I was just going to say there's so many moments. I was thinking of, just how each section is defined, but when he's on ecstasy and then at the very end, how they're completely transformed by the end. I mean, they're both just stunning and take us on such a beautiful journey.
For Sierra, for me, there's a great moment where she comes downstairs and she's using the ironing board. She's talking about an egg sandwich, and she just has this moment where she stops and thinks about it. It's sublimely funny, but it's also very poignant behavior for an addict who's losing connection to reality. For Tom, I think it's when he's in the hallway in the hospital, when she's in the room having had an overdose, and he's just sobbing because he feels such guilt about it. And it was one of the more difficult days of the shoot. It's hard to watch someone lay themselves bare like that raw, and you feel bad for them in a way because you know that they're accessing things that are very painful to them. But I thought that was a special moment.
Angela or Anthony, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I found it's such a small thing, but it's really remarkable the way that Tom handled breaking the fourth wall and doing it so seamlessly within the context of scenes. When he's coming out, he's being the character a good decade plus in the future, looking back at himself, and then he's right back in the scene again, and he does it again with the right humor when it's needed, and I found that to be quite special. I think for Sierra, the entire sequence with the safe and pills and coke, I was just so impressed by the way that she handled the humor of it, because it's not easy to pull off. She was so committed, and that's actually, I believe that was the scene that we saw her audition with. And it's just pretty amazing that, she invests herself so deeply in the moment and is so serious about it. And it's the fact that she's able to take the situation with the utmost seriousness that allows the humor, to shine through, and at a time when I think it's pretty needed for the audience. And the last one I would say for the both of them is the bus station scene. It was just really beautiful. And they were able to capture a different version of the character, each of them, in a way that, it just felt so surprising to me, the way Sierra held herself coming back, and just, you could tell she was a woman who had gone through rehab and was dying to get high again. And the level of complexity that existed, and the guilt that Tom was carrying as Cherry in that moment, knowing that he was not clean and he was not good for her, and he wanted her to go back, and her unwillingness to abandon him just really brought them to a certain depth that I think was so needed in order to achieve the beautiful moment at the end that Jess touched on.
Anthony, did you want to add anything to that?
I'll just add a small moment. There's both Tom and Sierra, again, they're so talented as performers, and they're young and they're strong people, and they were really able to be hard on themselves physically in order to achieve the sort of traumatic sort of physical presence of a junkie. I mean, and it was hard to watch them do that to themselves, but it what it brought to the movie was an amazing thing. And I will say there was one moment, there's a line I always really loved in the script that, when Cherry's robbing his last bank, he walks into the bank, he shoots his gun into the air, and he screams, "Nobody move, I'm a wanted man, they'll kill me." Mm-hmm. And I always love that line because it's such a crazily desperate line to put this on the people in the bank. And it's when Tom, but we never really talked about it specifically with Tom. But I remember on the day when he came in the bank, and he fires in the air, and he screams that line with such force. I mean, you can literally feel his vocal cords snapping as he screams this line. And it was just the way he performed it was like, I felt the desperation, like had a physical reaction to it in a way that was, even though I had high expectations for that moment, it took me way beyond that in terms of understanding, feeling who he was and the desperation of that moment for that character.
All right, guys, we're out of time, but you've answered all of my questions beautifully. I really hope that this film finds its audience, because I find the choices that you guys made, both in writing it and directing it, to be very interesting. I see a ton of movies, and I really like watching films with a voice, where the makers have a voice. So congratulations on the work, and thank you very much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Appreciate it.